chapter 8, please. Has anybody ever seen someone really demonized? Yep. There's a few here. Has anyone been demonized? You don't need to answer that, but we come from different backgrounds and it's all quite common these days. Well, this story is a dramatic story. It's another one of those gospel encounters that has just about everything in the story. And it raises, though, lots of questions. When I was preparing for this message, I looked at a number of Bible commentaries, and you wouldn't believe the number of commentaries that pretty much assumed that the man was just psychologically unstable and that there wasn't actually anything demonic or spiritual, seriously evil going on in the story. But it raises many questions. What questions come to mind for you when you think of this story? Yeah. Yes, good question. Other questions? Yeah. And what about the poor pig farmer losing all his stock? That wasn't very fair, Jesus. Yeah. Others, anyone else? Animal rights. What about the poor pigs? Yeah.
Just a sickness in the man. Why did it affect pigs?
Yes, that's a good connection to make. Yeah. Anyone else? These are all great questions. I think in going through this message, the number one question for me was, what was Jesus doing here? What was strategic about this particular event? So, let's take a look. First of all, as always, we need to go to the context. And that context begins in verse 22, which we have not read, which says, "One day Jesus got into the boat with his disciples and said to them, 'Let us go across to the other side of the lake.' So they put out." The story begins before we get to the story. Now, once they head out onto the lake, a terrible storm comes up. And we know that Jesus, through his power and authority, stills the storm. When the disciples thought that perhaps they were going to perish, all Jesus had to do was to command it to be calm. And the wind ceases, and there's calm, and he says, "Where is your faith?" They were afraid and amazed. Who is this then that commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him? A marvelous display of Jesus' authority as the creator of the universe with the Father and the Spirit. The authority and the power that he carried, which was being progressively revealed to his disciples. And that's very much what Luke, in writing this orderly account, is trying to show us. His authority being progressively revealed. Well, next it's going to be revealed over the spiritual world as well. That's the next stage, really, of this journey of revelation about who he is and what he can do. But let's just go back to the physical setting. The lake which today we call the Lake Galilee or Gennesaret, is not a massive lake, but there was a lot of geographical variation on the different parts of it. Now, Jesus' base was Capernaum, which is sort of in the northwest. And a lot of the events in the Gospels take place in that top half of the lake like that. Here, Jesus is saying, let's go to the other side of the lake. You don't normally go to the other side of the lake, to the eastern side, because it's Gentile territory. And there's not many that not many towns. There's more towns a little bit to on the corner of the lake, the southwestern, further south, called the Decapolis, those 10 cities that come up again in the Gospels. And if you look at the shoreline on the eastern side, it's pretty steep and rocky. There's steep cliffs, so no wonder there aren't a lot of fishing villages and towns along the shore, but for some reason Jesus wanted to go there. And so they set out, and the storm intervenes, and Jesus demonstrates his authority over the elements. And now they arrive. Verse 26, the weather has calmed down, and they can get back onto their course, wherever they are heading. Now, we're told in verse 26, it's opposite Galilee. And as he stepped out on land, a man of the city who had demons met him. Now, I think that the landing place wasn't right in the middle of the town. I think it was to one edge of the town where the cemetery might be. Now, the cemetery in those places are caves in the hillside. That's where you're buried. You're buried in caves, basically. So it wasn't a wide open place where everybody could see you coming and there's lots of people. I think it was isolated off to one side, and one person saw this boat coming. Now, everyone else had been sheltering from the storm, but there's one person who didn't have a lot of shelter, one person who lived in the caves where all the dead people are buried. He saw this boat coming, and he came to the shore. And he came to see who this person was. Now, we've given some information about him. In verse 27, he had demons, plural, that's clearly, and he was so controlled by these demons that he had not worn any clothes and could no longer live in normal human society, and just sheltered himself in these tombs with the dead, where if you want to pick up maybe some more demons, you probably come to the right place. Can you imagine what life is like for this pitiable man, this poor creature, rejected by everybody else, just living in the tombs? Can you imagine the tortured life that he lived? Well, you know, it's just possible that Jesus went on that journey just for him. Now, I think Jesus deliberately went into Gentile territory because his mission as Messiah was ultimately not just to Israel. It was from Israel to the whole world. And what we actually see here is the first of the Gentile missions. That was, I think, a very strategic journey. They're already making a big impact in Galilee and beyond, but it's eventually going to go further. And so Jesus ventures into that Gentile territory. And how did that work out for him in that Gentile territory? How many converts did he make? What, just one? Did they welcome into their houses? And did a church get set up in that Gentile territory? No. Let's see. Let's have look a little bit further to see. The man, when he meets Jesus, he cries out, falls down, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." You see that the demons in him are now speaking. It is that they fear the torment of being in the presence of the Son of the Most High God. Here these spiritual creatures know whose spiritual presence they are in, and they speak out, they cry out the truth. And so he is forced to the ground, "Do not torment me." Now we see in the next verses that Jesus had already commanded the unclean spirit, it says in this point, the unclean spirit, I think it's spirits, to come out of the man. I think as soon as the man, Jesus stepped foot on the shore, the man came towards him, that it's at that point, before there was any other conversation, that Jesus commanded the evil spirits to come out of him. He didn't wait till he was requested. He just demonstrated his authority. Having shown his authority over the elements, now it was complete authority over the spiritual world. Come out of him. And they react, as they do in an exorcism situation. They react and take over the person's body, and they struggle. And we've seen in this account how the power of the demonic can overpower even iron shackles. And so here's this man, you probably with the remnants of the shackles around his wrists and his ankles, and with no clothes on. And so, while he's reacting, while this is taking place, and in this way, in some ways, this is a lesson in dealing with the demonic. What is your name? He said, Legion, for many demons had entered him. In the Roman army, a legion is 6,000 soldiers. 6,000 soldiers. Now, I don't know if there were 6,000 demons, but clearly we're told there's more than one. There's many, and there's enough for a whole herd of pigs to each get taken over. So, do not order them to go into the abyss. That's what they feared. The abyss is basically hell. That's what they mean. Hell is a prison created by God to imprison the rebellious spirits. That's ultimately where they go when they are defeated. And they have to go to prison because they won't die. You can't kill them. They won't die. So you disempower them by putting them in prison. And that's where the devil will go, and all the spirits with him. And they know that. And they wanted to prolong their time on this earth, causing mayhem. And so they make this requests, and Jesus grants the request. Here we have the large herd of swine. I like saying swine rather than pigs, the swine feeding. And so they enter the swine, and they stampede down the steep bank into the lake, and they're drowned. Now, for the poor pig farmer, the swine herd, as it says in some translations, pretty much loses his livelihood, at least for a year or two. No more roast pork. And from the point of view of this being a Jewish text, well, that's no problem, because you're not allowed to go near the pigs anyway. Yeah. What is important is that a man is set free. That's the big thing. A man is set free. The love of God is demonstrated here by freeing the unlovable, the impossible person that no one could do anything about. God can do it. The power of Jesus can do it with just a word to command the spirits out. And it may well, so what we're meant to see here is that the value of salvation far outweighs the value of a herd of swine. And so we see that they get their request granted, and they rush down the bank, and they're drowned. Now, here's the reaction. Jesus has demonstrated his power and authority. He has shown his love and compassion for this person that no one else could love. And this people begin to react. Now, you would think that if someone came with such power and the results were so dramatic, that the people would be interested in maybe having some more of that. Not these people. It was the loss of the herd that was the overwhelming thing, understandably, for those people, and they ran into the city. It would be more of a village, I think you'd call it. They ran and they told everybody what had happened. And then they come out to see for themselves if this is true. And there, sitting down with Jesus, is the man, we're told, clothed and in his right mind, completely transformed. And they would be shocked to see what has happened to this man that they had rejected, that they wanted nothing more of. And they became frightened. They became frightened. Why? Because here is a power that's more than we want. Frightened because if he keeps on doing this, what else is going to run off the side of the cliff, or what might change in our lives that we don't want to lose? They become frightened. And so the fear even grows through the whole community. And they say to Jesus, "Go back, go away. We do not want you here." How many times had that happened to Jesus in his ministry? Not that many. We don't get much record of rejection, do we? We get resistance from spiritual authorities because of the implications of what he says and what he does. But there's not much community rejection. Usually crowds gather and they want to be set free. They want to be healed as well. But we are in Gentile territory and they're probably not waiting and longing for the Messiah to come. That's right. That joins lots of dots together. Yes, it does. Yes. So their normal religious practices would have opened them up to demonic influence and even possession, depending on what they've been doing. Yeah. He would not have been the only one, but he was the worst. And so the whole spiritual chain of authority in that area was now under threat. And no one wanted that to change except one man who was the powers within him were overpowered and salvation came to him. The Greek word for salvation and healing is the same one and the same. It's sozo, S-O-Z-O. Sozo came to him that day and he was utterly transformed. And so Jesus did what the townspeople wanted in verse 37. He got into the boat and he returned. Now the man who was set free wanted to stay with Jesus. He probably was not terribly welcome in his community after what had happened. Certainly not in the farming community, one could venture. But he just wanted more of Jesus. Just more of Jesus. His life had been changed. And why wouldn't you? In his circumstances, he didn't have much to lose, did he? By becoming yet another one of the transformed people following Jesus on his ongoing mission. But curiously, Jesus sent him away and said, "Return to your home and declare how much God has done for you." And so he went away and proclaimed throughout the city how much Jesus had done for him. Here we have actually the fulfillment of Jesus' strategic mission. That's what Jesus wanted. This man carried on what Jesus started. He became the very first evangelist to the Gentiles. That's quite something, isn't it? And I think that's why Luke included that story in the gospel account. And in Matthew and Mark, it's there as well. That's pretty significant. And you could never plan it that way, could you? On the face of it, that day, if Jesus was writing up his diary or Judas was writing up his diary, the mission diary, you would say it was a disaster. Terrible storm, nearly died, rejected by the people of the Gerasenes. So we came back home. Just one person ministered to. Compared with the usual sort of fruit that they see when they travel around. I don't know what Jesus expected that day, but he knew he had to go. And just one person made all the difference. Just one person. Now, we don't know what happened to the pig farmer after that. We don't know how things went for that man. Maybe there is a tradition there, a Christian tradition. We would imagine that more lives were changed through the testimony of that man. So we see in this powerful story the demonstration of Jesus' authority, not only over the elements, but over the spiritual realm as well. It only requires his name to set people free, to send the demons out, and they're gone. Now there's a little bit more to it than that, but that shows now his authority, complete authority, an authority that in following chapters he was then to give, to delegate to his disciples to go and do more of the same. So this sets up a demonstration for them of what they can then do. So it was important that this took place. We see the love and the compassion of Jesus to go and risk his life for what turned out to be one man, and how his power can transform lives. There's no life too far gone to not be transformed by the power of Jesus' name. No life. No one who's fallen too far who cannot be brought back, cannot be redeemed and transformed. And it shows us the power of testimony. Go and tell others what God has done for you. Go and tell others. We can be sure that that had a great impact on that region. And it's a pretty simple thing to do, isn't it? This is what God has done for me. We heard from Louisa, just a simple testimony this morning, but that's something that we can take with us anywhere. This is what God has done for me. Wherever we work, wherever we recreate within our families, simply our personal testimony, well, this is what God has done for me. No one can argue with that, can they? And if it's a demonstration of that supernatural power, well, that brings people closer to meeting the risen Lord Jesus. And so we conclude from this dramatic encounter, this dramatic demonstration of the power and the authority of Jesus, and then the reception of his love and his grace, and then his instruction to go and tell how much Jesus has done for you. Let's all do that. Let's pray.